Hey everyone, how are you doing? It is Craig Campbell from Pastor Craig's Vintage Cards, and today we're looking at this 1961 Topps card of Dick Brown, catcher for the Detroit Tigers, and a pretty nice looking card. Not too bad, very typical of the 61s, um, where it's a little bit off center, but other than that, it's a nice card, and you can see that Dick, he broke into minor league ball with the Cleveland Indians in 1953. Playing up in Green Bay. And how did he get into the major leagues is kind of interesting. As an American League high school kid, in the American Legion as a high school kid, he was catching for none other than Herb Score. And Herb was scouted by many teams, to include the Cleveland Indians. And Cleveland signed Herb Score to a $50,000 signing bonus. And Herb's sister said, hey, that catcher Dick Brown's pretty good too. And Dick had started at Florida State on a scholarship. I think he went there for 6 months. And the Indians came knocking after they listened to Herb Score's sister. And they signed Dick Brown to a $3,000 contract. And off he went to begin his minor league career. Now Dick made his major league debut in 1957 with the Cleveland Indians. And what's really interesting is that very first series, a 3-game series, he ended up catching Early Wen and Bob Lemon in 2 of the 3 games, and they both threw complete games. But those were 2 future Hall of Fame pitchers. And so kind of remember that about Dick, that catching Hall of Fame pitchers. And so he played with Cleveland from 57 to 59, then he went to the White Sox in 1960. The Tigers in 61 and 62, and then he signed with the Baltimore Orioles, and he was with Baltimore from 63 to 65. Now, when he was playing in those other teams, he was kind of always a backup catcher. He never really was the starting guy, and he was a pretty good catcher, but a good glove and not much of a bat. And he finally signs with Baltimore, and Baltimore traded away their catcher, and it looked like finally that Dick was going to become the starting catcher for a team. And he ended up going to spring training in 66, and he ended up having some really bad migraine headaches. And he'd been suffering with them for a while. And so they sent him back, and he went to a doctor, and they did some looking and testing, and they ended up finding a brain tumor that required surgery. And so he had a brain tumor, had surgery for that. And then 11 and a half weeks later, they found another brain tumor. And they had to do surgery on that. And so that effectively canceled out his 1966 season. Of course, the Baltimore Orioles ended up going to the World Series, and they won it that year. But the Orioles were so touched by Dick's situation that they offered him a full share of the World Series money, and he also received a ring as a World Series champion for the Baltimore Orioles. Plus, he threw out the first pitch for Game 3 of that World Series. And that was the end of Dick's baseball career, was the brain tumors. And then he ended up sticking around with the Orioles. They kept him as a scout all the way through until his death in 1970 at the age of 35, when they found an additional brain tumor. And he ended up dying from brain cancer at the age of only 35 in 1970. And what's really interesting about Dick Brown, though, is that Dick he's actually in second place. I got to say this right. Jim Hegan holds the record for having caught 7 Hall of Fame pitchers. Jim Hegan caught 7 Hall of Fame pitchers. Dick Brown and a few other guys are tied for second place, having caught 6 Hall of Fame pitchers. And Dick Brown had caught for Early Wen and for Bob Lemon, and then he caught for Hoyt Wilhelm, Jim Bunning, Jim Palmer, and Robin Roberts. And that's a pretty neat thing to do, is to have caught for 6 Hall of Fame pitchers. And of course, Dick never knew that because he passed away in 1970, long before Wilhelm, Bunning, Palmer, and I believe even Robin Roberts were in the Hall of Fame, and maybe the other guys too. But yeah, Dick died way too young at the age of 35 from brain cancer. But he has a place in baseball. And all these guys on these cards, his last card was a 1963 Topps. They all have a story. And I really enjoy finding the story about these guys. And when I saw that he was in second place for having caught 6 Hall of Fame catchers, I knew I had to make a story about Dick Brown. And guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you do, please leave me a comment and give me a like. And everybody take care and keep on collecting. We will talk later.